Captain Derek Voss had exactly 40 seconds to make a joke he'd regret for the rest of his career. He watched a woman climb down out of the cargo plane that had just taxied in beside the fighter squadron's flight line, plain flat-pack luggage in hand, no visible rank, walking with the unhurried calm of someone who clearly wasn't in a hurry to impress anyone. "Guess the fighter jocks finally started hiring cargo pilots for morale," he called out to the group of F-35 pilots standing near him, loud enough for her to hear. "You lost, ma'am? Fighter squadron's the shiny jets over there." A few laughs rippled through the group. She set her bag down calmly, glanced at the row of F-35s behind them, and said nothing. "No, seriously," Derek continued, enjoying the attention. "I didn't realize cargo pilots got escorted onto our flight line these days." That's when a young airman jogged up with a manifest clipboard, glanced at it, and called out toward the group without thinking twice. "Iron Ghost, sir, we've got your gear staged near Hangar 2 whenever you're ready." Every single F-35 pilot on that tarmac went rigid and snapped to attention at once. Derek Voss felt his stomach drop as 12 of the most skilled fighter pilots on the base stood in perfect silence around him, and he slowly understood he'd just mocked one of the most respected names in the entire program. Stick around, because what happens over the next 20 minutes of this story is one of the most satisfying reversals we've ever told on this channel. And if you love watching arrogance collide head-on with a legend nobody saw coming, hit subscribe right now, because we post a new story exactly like this one every single week. Colonel Ana Petrov hadn't flown a cargo aircraft in over a decade, not because she couldn't, but because today's flight required exactly that kind of aircraft, and she'd never been the type of pilot who cared what she was seen flying in. Her call sign, Iron Ghost, had nothing to do with fighter aircraft at all, at least, not originally. It came from an early point in her career, flying deep insertion missions in aircraft nobody would ever describe as glamorous, delivering personnel and equipment into locations so contested that survival alone had become the stuff of legend among the people who'd flown with her. The name stuck because she'd developed a reputation for getting impossible missions done in whatever aircraft the mission required, expensive fighter jet or not. Later in her career, she'd transitioned into a role overseeing tactical integration for the F-35 program, evaluating pilots, refining combat doctrine, occasionally flying the aircraft herself when the mission called for it. But today's assignment had simply required a cargo plane to transport sensitive equipment ahead of tomorrow's joint exercise, and she'd volunteered to fly it personally rather than delegate it, exactly the way she always had. She didn't wear her rank insignia particularly visibly. She never had. She'd learned decades ago that people who needed to know who she was already knew, and everyone else's assumptions rarely lasted long enough to matter. Today, those assumptions were about to collide head-on with a squadron of F-35 pilots who had absolutely no idea who'd just climbed out of that cargo plane. Derek Voss wasn't malicious. He was young, talented, and had built an entire personality around being the funniest guy in his squadron, a reputation that occasionally outran his judgment. "I'm just saying," he continued, glancing at his friends for approval. "You don't exactly see cargo pilots hanging around the fighter line very often. This a field trip or something?" Anya said nothing, simply glancing toward the row of F-35s with mild interest. The kind of look someone gives an aircraft they already know intimately, rather than one they're seeing for the first time. "Seriously, though," he pressed, "you fly that thing solo, or do they give you backup for the tricky landings?" A couple of the other pilots chuckled, though a few had started to look uncomfortable with how far he was taking it. That's when the young airman jogged up with the manifest. "Iron Ghost, sir, we've got your gear staged near Hangar 2 whenever you're ready." The words landed like a physical blow. Every pilot standing near Derek went rigid, snapping to attention almost instantly, the laughter dying in the same breath it had been born in. Derek was the last one to react, still half processing what he'd just heard. "Iron Ghost?" he repeated, barely above a whisper. If you love watching the exact second someone's confidence completely collapses, you're going to enjoy the rest of this story even more. But first, go ahead and hit that subscribe button, because this channel is full of moments exactly like this one. For a long moment, nobody said anything at all. Every pilot on that tarmac had heard the name Iron Ghost before. In training materials, in doctrine reviews, in the kind of hushed respect reserved for people whose reputation preceded them into every room they entered. Nobody had expected her to walk off a cargo plane in plain gear, unassuming, entirely unbothered by the aircraft she'd just flown in on. "Colonel Petrov," Derek finally managed, snapping into a salute a full beat behind everyone else. "Ma'am, I had no idea. I was just making jokes about cargo pilots not belonging on your flight line," she finished for him, not unkindly. "I heard." The tarmac had gone completely silent, several pilots suddenly finding their equipment checklists extremely absorbing. "Ma'am, I'm sorry, You don't need to apologize for not recognizing me," she said. "I didn't exactly walk off that plane announcing myself. That's not what concerns me." "Then what does, ma'am?" She considered the question, unhurried despite the tension radiating around her. "The part where you decided, the second you saw someone step out of a cargo aircraft instead of a fighter jet, that she couldn't possibly belong anywhere near your flight line. You didn't ask who I was, Captain. You just assumed the aircraft told you everything you needed to know about the pilot flying it." Derek had no response to that. "I've flown insertion missions in aircraft a lot less glamorous than that cargo plane, into places most of the pilots on this tarmac will only ever read about in a briefing packet," she continued. "But that's honestly not the real issue. The real issue is you'd have made the same joke about anyone who climbed out of that aircraft, regardless of what they'd actually done in this uniform. That's the part worth sitting with." Word of the tarmac incident spread through the base before Colonel Petrov had even finished unloading her cargo. By the time she walked into the joint exercise briefing an hour later, every pilot in the room already knew exactly what had happened, and the story had already picked up the kind of embellishment that comes standard with retellings, though the core of it needed no exaggeration at all. She didn't single Derek out during the briefing. She didn't need to. The entire squadron had watched the moment unfold in real time, and the discomfort in the room told her everything she needed to know about how thoroughly the lesson had landed. Afterward, Derek approached her privately, without an audience this time. "Colonel Petrov, I need to apologize properly. Not the version I gave when I was still in shock." "Go ahead." "I judged you based on the aircraft you climbed out of, and decided that meant you didn't belong near actual fighter pilots. That's not who I want to be in this uniform." She studied him for a long moment. "That's a more honest answer than most people manage, Captain. I've been flying F-35s for 3 years, he said. I think I started believing the aircraft made the pilot, instead of the other way around. You just proved exactly how wrong that instinct is." "It's wrong more often than people like to admit," she said. "Some of the most capable pilots I've ever worked with spent years flying aircraft nobody thought twice about. The jet doesn't make the judgment calls. The person flying it does." "Understood, ma'am. It won't happen again." "See that it doesn't," she said. "Not because of who I turned out to be. Because of who the next person climbing out of an unglamorous aircraft might actually be." In the weeks that followed, something in Derek Voss noticeably shifted. He didn't transform overnight. That isn't how real change happens, and Anya wasn't interested in a performance of guilt. But the other pilots in his squadron started noticing small things. He stopped commenting on what people flew in on. He started asking questions about people's backgrounds before deciding who deserved his respect and who didn't. 2 months later, during a joint exercise, an unassuming pilot in unmarked gear stepped off a modest transport aircraft to observe a training rotation. The old version of Derek might have made a comment. This version simply introduced himself, asked about the pilot's background, and treated him exactly like every other aviator on the tarmac, right up until the debrief revealed the man had flown more classified missions than anyone else present, Derek included. He didn't need a call sign to remind him twice. Colonel Petrov never brought up the tarmac incident again in any official capacity. She didn't need to. The story had already made its way through every squadron on base, retold with a mix of embarrassment and quiet respect. The one about the captain who mocked a cargo pilot, right up until the manifest said her call sign, and every F-35 pilot on the tarmac snapped to attention at once. Here's a question for you. If you were standing on that tarmac and heard the airman call her Iron Ghost, right after watching Derek mock her for climbing out of a cargo plane, would you have laughed along with the group earlier? Or would you have been the one person who paused and asked who she actually was first? Tell me your honest answer in the comments below. I want to know if the aircraft would have changed your first impression the way it changed his. If this story kept you hooked the way it did while I was writing it, do me a favor and hit that subscribe button, because we post a brand new story just like this one every single week. Stories about the people who prove every doubter wrong exactly when it matters most. Tap the notification bell too, so you never miss the next one. Thanks for watching all the way through. I'll see you in the next story.